Okay, ladies, we're back. So these are our, our casual conversations about the book, The Anxious Generation. And, we are not claiming to be experts in all areas as therapists, but I do think it's important for us to engage in the more recent, I think it's been a year now, this book has been out, and people have been engaging with it, lots of questions from our clients, but then also how to come alongside it and read it and bring the biblical aspect into it as well. Mm-hmm. And so just a little bit of a review. We kind of did the big picture in our last video where we did an introduction into kind of the dramatic changes from 2010 with the rise of social media, the cell phone, the smartphone, if you will, kind of refers and looks at the great rewiring of the childhood mind. I think that's how he framed it, and which led to a sharp increase, and there's a lot of statistics that we even talked about last time, and engaging in that with anxiety, depression, and kind of some other mental health with Gen Z. But as we said, right, it's a little Gen Z millennial, right, engagement, and really saw it in 2010, right, that less free time was replaced with screen time, looking at the shift in kind of the disruption of the natural development process, taking risks, independent play, which in the play area, which we'll talk a little bit more about today, and looking at, again, the increase in social media being more of social media parenting and less actual parenting, right? What was the terminology he used exactly? You just said it. Over parenting
in the real over parenting in the real world, under parenting in technology.
Yes.
Online.
Right.
Digital world,
right? That's kind of how he was framing it in there. But in this constant connection, right, to the virtual world and lack of boundaries within the virtual world, and more boundaries in the actual world when it comes to play and imagination and exploration and all of these things, right? And there's a lot of statistics or a lot of neuroscience that's wrapped up into a lot of what he's saying, and not a lot of biblical, which we all are coming from that perspective, being that we all went to seminary, we all value that immensely, so we'll kind of engage a little bit with that conversation as well. So Shannon's going to track with us with chapters a little bit so that you can follow along if you're reading. I will claim that, I also listen to this book, and that I'm trying to listen to lots of different books, and so there's nothing wrong with that either. But so then bring us up to speed in terms of chapters, and let's engage with it.
Yeah, so we're looking at, this is part 2, the backstory, the decline of play-based childhood. So chapters 2, 3, and 4. 2 being what children need to do in childhood. 3 being discover mode and the need for risky play. And 4 being puberty and the blocked transition to adulthood.
Yeah, good. Let's even, because we have so many, well, me, I guess, being, what was your idea of play when you were a kid? I can kind of start, because I remember distinctly my mom saying, and this was a single mom, so she had her hands full, but she would just say, go outside.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember going outside and running around with neighbors and playing. I even remember a scary situation where a car came alongside me and was like, hi, and I had to figure out what to do, and me and my little girlfriend just ran off and screamed. And, I remember climbing a tree in a neighbor's yard and falling out and losing my breath. And going, what do I do? And, we just kind of figured it out. And running across 3 lanes of traffic, I had to figure that out. I just remember that being a large bit of my childhood, not growing up with any social media, any cell phone, any connectability. If I was going to get hurt, I would have ran to a neighbor's door and said, call my mom, and she would have called a landline.
Yeah.
And if she wasn't home, I had to figure that out too. Yeah. That was my childhood. Yeah. Being 45 years old. So, what about y'all?
You said play, and I immediately thought of Barbies.
Okay.
My mom is from all girls. I'm from all girls. We were crushing some Barbie play. A lot of highly relational, kind of navigating in real time relational issues played out through Barbies. And then we were outside a ton too. We lived in the cul-de-sac. We had a big backyard, and so it was playing in the neighborhood with kids, and a lot of bike rides, scooters, outside. Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah.
I would say mine was similar. Like with my elementary school play, like was playing with neighbors and getting in mud and picking flowers and all of the like silly fun things that we do outside. And there was a transition, of course, of that in middle school, being like my 6th grade year was when iPhones came out. Maybe not quite, but that was when I got a phone. And I guess it was a few years later. And so even that transition of like, oh, now we're texting to meet up instead of like the agreed meeting spot that we had, and we're communicating more virtually, and our like sleepovers look different, where it is like surrounding the phone or like IMing or something along those lines. And so still a lot of outdoor play, especially being like at that prime age and that transition to phones and technology, like that still was a part of what we did. And but it did start to get incorporated for sure.
Yeah. Gwen and I are about the same age, and so I pretty much experienced the same thing.
Yeah.
Like I remember a distinct, and it's interesting how it went from elementary school into middle school. Like going into those pubescent years, like there is so much that's happening socially, and and so like the early childhood years, similar to y'all, I remember like playing outside, doing Foursquare tournaments for hours, kickball tournaments. My mom was a teacher, and so she would give my brother and I a walkie-talkie and be like, I love y'all, but I need a break. And so until your dad's tires hit the driveway, like, Godspeed, you know? Yes, yeah. And so we would figure things out. But then, you know, with the introduction of the cell phone and then social media as well, Facebook was really popular, IMing as well, and, you know, crowding around the computer, watching YouTube videos, or, you know, texting people's crushes. It really kind of turned to almost this like virtual reality versus actually connecting in relationship with people in the present moment.
Yeah, I love that.
I almost mentioned walkie-talkies too, actually. That was a big part of things. Oh yeah. In the neighborhood kids, we all had walkie-talkies.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. You know, that's good.
So we're talking about play and what it looked like in our childhood and how it's changed now, what it looks like modern. And so free play is a lot of what we're talking about here. So that's play that is child-led, child-directed. It's part of what I incorporate into the therapy I get to do with kids, which is really fun. And it's defined here, page 52. Free play as activity that is freely chosen and directed by the participants and undertaken for its own sake, not consciously pursued to achieve ends that are distinct from the activity itself. So it is play directed by kids for play's sake. Yeah. Key feature being that mistakes are really low cost. You can make a mistake and it doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah, I love that. Instantaneously, when you said that too, I thought of God's design for creativity, specifically in children.
Yeah.
That there's no directive. It's just like, go play, use your imagination, use the creativity, use everything I've given you, and just be free.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no shame and guilt. There's no condemnation. There's even to some degree no repair that needs to be had, because you're just kind of figuring it out. You know? I feel like when people get involved and their expectations and their opinions get involved, that's when then the shame and guilt, I'm doing something wrong, right, come into play. Yeah. So I love that. I do feel like that is imitating God's creativity, and He uses children to do it. You know?
And the distinction that we're making here is he refers to a play-based childhood versus a phone-based childhood. And so play-based is what we were describing. Phone-based is going to be like it's predominantly through texting. It's play-based being embodied, synchronous, one-to-one or one-to-several, and then there's a cost to join or leave relationally versus phone-based is what we talked about before, disembodied, asynchronous, so not in real time, and then doesn't have to be one-to-one or one-to-several. You can be doing many at the same time.
Yeah.
So texting lots of people at the same time, chatting with a lot of people at the same time, and then low cost to join or leave, so you can just X out or not respond.
Yeah.
And to what you were describing earlier, Jen, of like God being present in relationship with us and inviting us to be co-creators with Him, and be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Like we get to be creative with Him. Another like biblical theme that has stood out to me a lot is face to face. That God engages with us face to face. Like Jacob wrestled with God, and he says, like, I met God face to face, and yet my life was spared. Like Moses went from a place of scheming and deceiving and manipulating and hiding from God at the burning bush, and then in Exodus 33 he meets God face to face. And what you're describing, Shannon, of like that attunement that is synchronous, it's in the present moment, and there's something about like engaging in relationship with other people that I even am hearing like some secure attachment as well.
For sure.
And what you were saying too, of like you're free to make mistakes, and then there is repair. It's very low cost, and engaging in relationships with other people.
Yeah, chapter 2 also talks about a slow growth childhood, where humans, most creatures, like if you look at chimpanzees, they have a constant growth. Whereas people, we have quick growth first 2 years, slow down growth, and then you kind of hit puberty and adulthood, and then growth. Why do y'all think if people we're created in God's image, we're image bearers, what is unique about that for us? Like, why would maybe God have created us like that?
Yeah, versus the chimpanzee.
Or animals that have like a steady growth. He's talking about how the slow growth allows us to acquire skills and build relationships.
Yeah.
In that slowed down time, it's like, I think, a time of like so much learning, and I don't know, I wonder if it's like God's design for us to be relational. It's more like I'm curious about this. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Sure.
And you've talked about too, Jen, like God has made us for interdependence in relationships, not independence. And so I wonder, to your point, Shannon, if it were like super quick and we get all of these skills, that like we could be self-sufficient. But the fact that it's like a slower like trajectory, we're having to learn attachment, we're having to learn attunement, we're having to learn how to engage in relationships with other people.
Well, and rely on your parents. Learn how to rely on your parents, and you can learn how to rely on God. Or as a parent, you get the opportunity to be trustworthy and allow children to rely on you and model for them that they can rely on God.
Well, even that part gets really interesting later in chapter 3 when it starts to talk more about secure attachment and how like one of the major changes was that like in having more highly anxious parents that were more motivated to protect in the real world. They presented more anxious, and so kids were not feeling safe to go out and explore and fail, and they were staying home at secure base. They weren't going out and playing and doing the things that they need in order to like create that confidence in themselves and the secure attachment to then go and securely attach to God and other people.
Yeah, I think it's, Erik Erikson, who we value in kind of the family system world, where he researched over 1,000 families and came up with, developmental stages, and how kids grow in different developmental stages, and how from kids to adult. And there are distinct things that happen within those stages for a proper growth process, and it is skills that you're learning, right? And so the way God, I think, looked at it, and I do think, where you see, God creates a child, and I love in Mark 10:14, where he says, let the little children come to me, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. just Jesus recognizing the unique value and perspective that children have, and that let them come to me, that they have a closeness, that they have value, that they're not discarded because they're young, right? That I think it's important to say each developmental stage of life, they have value, they're learning something. How does the attachment of adult come alongside them and help them in the learning process, as they're also detaching from, which is hard, but detaching from the family and learning how to depend and cling to God as a secure source of attachment. You know, I think that, you know, as a Christian's perspective, looking at it through that lens is a little bit different, because Erik Erikson did not come from the biblical perspective. And so just going, I do think there's merit in both of those worlds as we're engaging with that question of going, God's design's in it all. How is the perspective of science and the world coming alongside that design and going, kids need to learn skills along the way, and they're depending on their parents to teach them, right? To some degree. Yeah, so I think it's again, chewing and pondering is what we're doing. Allowing ourselves just to be able to do that, not judging ourselves and coming to some conclusion, I think is important.
You not talk about it too much. You mentioned it briefly.
Yeah. Well, I also, to your, I think I had this thought. When you were talking earlier about, like, children don't have filters. Like, they, the way that they engage with the world is very authentic. They don't know any other way how to. They're very joyful and innocent. And there was another descriptor that you had given in our earlier conversation, but and so they're engaging authentically in the world around them. There's a thought there of just like fostering that that authenticity and not hiding or withdrawing or disengaging. Like thinking about that biblical example of Jacob, for instance, like he was lying, scheming, deceiving, manipulating. He was just being who he was, and God met him like very intimately and wrestled with him. But and wrestling is like literally all of your physical force. You know, it's very, very intimate. And then like he came out of that with like a new name and a new identity, but it was because he presented the full of himself. And so anyway, I'm like thinking about children and their authenticity, the wonder that they engage with the world, and then like the point where shame is injected in is where there's like disengagement from relationship and like having that attunement of like, I see you in all of your wonder and your glory and your innocence, and I delight in you, and there's nothing that you could say that's gonna or do that's gonna like break this.
I think a spirit of playfulness fosters that environment really well. Because it's one that says like the way that you show up, the way that you play, I'm not going to shut it down. I'm going to roll with it. We're going to laugh. You can make a mistake here and it's going to be fine. And if it's a big one, like we'll talk about it, but we're not going to shut it down and bring shame into it.
It reminds me of improv and theater.
Totally. I think about that all the time. Yes, and.
Well, that even moves really beautifully into the chapter 3, if we can move on, with the like defend mode versus discover mode. Like I thought that was very profound, especially as we talk about like discover mode being associated with play and like freedom and the ability to fail and viewing life as like, oh, there's so many opportunities for me to go and take and experience and learn and engage. Versus the defend mode when we perceive a threat that we all can go into of, oh, it's not safe, I must protect myself. And the way that shuts down that part of our brain that you were referring to of being able to be curious and to fail. And that defend mode is a hard place to get stuck in and can lead to a lot of anxiety when we do get stuck in that place.
It's the chronically activated anxiety is defend mode, it's ongoing.
And where you said, you know, how play incorporates brain, right? The brain work of going, it stimulates brain growth, right? It's an active participant in helping with problem solving, making decisions, right? Like that is a wildly important aspect of it. And then when we fear, when there's a fear, right, we go into what, right? Protection mode.
Yeah, self-protection.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, you know, we're either fighting or we're fleeing or we're freezing or we're doing something. So now we're in protective mode.
Yeah.
We're no longer, right? And now our bodies are being fueled with stress and inflammation and adrenaline to some degree, right? And we're not working out of our imaginary play, free self. We're now scared, you know?
Yeah.
And so just how the brain plays a massive role into that, and it's diffusing, it's calm, it's fun, it's bringing all the stress down, it's bringing all the cortisone levels, which is stress, it's bringing all of the inflammation, and it's healthier.
Yeah, that's part of my objective in play therapy. Is I want kids who come in for whatever reason, when they leave, they've experienced some of that stress relief. That is a piece of what I'm incorporating, because I want them to leave, you know, regulated and having experienced the discover mode.
Yeah. I even wonder if that's an interesting reflection for parents to consider, that defend mode can look really different depending on your kid.
Yeah.
And that understanding your kid's defend mode can help.
Yeah.
Like, especially you working with so many children,
Yeah.
like come alongside their kid and equip them to see defend mode, whatever that looks like for their kid, and help them to get to a place of re-regulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I mean, I have 3 kids and I see it very evidently. The world's, and let me be frank, I'm a human, so part of their broken world is me and the way I've parented them and the way I've shown up in my own pain. And so seeing that, how they can go in that defend mode and play of going, I don't want to add to the stress and the brokenness. I want to help them make sense of it and take myself out of it. But then just give them the freedom of go, there's no judgment in play. There's no expectation in play. There's no, unless you have a boy and he wants to play the rules, the baseball rules. But you know, I think about Sandlot, you know, that movie Sandlot. I loved it so much because, yeah, there were some baseball rules, but it was pretty subjective, you know, when the ball went over the fence and they're like, the game got diverted and now we're in imaginary play. It's how do we get the ball back from the neighbor and this crazy dog, you know?
But I think that's the child-led component of it, is like there's not adults who are saying, okay, these are the rules, and here's how we're going to stick to them, and you have violated them.
Well, it's even as logical as like, let's go knock on the front door. I can't remember Sandlot. Like, you know, like would have been the most efficient. They did that.
Yeah, they got scared.
Okay. Well, then never mind. But I think to be able to fail, to be able to climb into someone's backyard when you maybe shouldn't have, and almost get eaten by a dog, but not.
But it's kids solving the problem. Yeah.
100%. I don't even think there was a parent in Sandlot if it wasn't about that. Yeah, I love that, you know, for sure.
Well, some elements of discover mode and defend mode that have been laid out here for 2 basic mindsets. I just think these are cool to touch on. Discover mode is scanning for opportunities, a kid in a candy shop, thinking for yourself, and kind of an attitude of let me grow. Defend mode being scanning for danger, scarcity mindset, cling to your team, and keep me safe.
Yeah.
Radically different.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a couple weeks ago, the fixed mindset
I knew you were going to go
versus
there.
the growth mindset. And we were talking about it in regards to intellect. And I think, you know, just as intellect and play and all other aspects of like, if we don't have the growth mindset where we're a constantly changing, evolving, sanctified, to bring the Bible into it, process, right? Person of going, we are different, hopefully, tomorrow than we were today. And we want to cultivate all of those mindsets so that we can have growth versus the fixed of like, no, the world's scary, the world's dangerous, you stay inside, we don't engage, it's just very fixed. And those are some of the hardest people to come alongside in the counseling world, right, is because they do not see the world themselves as an evolving, changing being, right?
Yeah. I'm even thinking about this generation of kids that grew up with parents navigating COVID and the
Oh, yeah.
uncertainty of, I mean, that was such a defend mode.
Mm-hmm.
And so many anxiety-based choices. And at the beginning it made sense because we didn't know what COVID was and we didn't know what 2 weeks to flatten, like staying home, all that stuff. There's like even a scarcity mindset in like toilet paper. Like nobody can find toilet paper because we're like also scared.
Yeah.
We're hoarding
Yes.
toilet paper. But there is a real generation of kids that watch their parents do all of that.
Yeah.
And that's where like mirror neurons and modeling for kids is so important because you can preach the discover mode, but if you're modeling defend mode, that is what your kids are still going to do.
Yeah.
So practicing those things for yourself and having a growth mindset yourself, it's the perhaps best thing you can do for your kids
Yeah.
to have a discover mode or a growth mindset.